alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Hello and welcome to Alive After Reading. I'm Tim Niederreiter, and with me today is a mighty returning guest, famous from his previous interview where I totally screwed up a bunch. It's ZigZag Claybourne. Welcome back to the podcast, Zig.
Thank you for having me again. This is a pleasure because it's been way too long.
In fact, it has been. It's been like a year or two. Yeah.
Maybe more. Well, considering that this year feels like 12 years, so it's been 12, 13 years, we'll say.
Wow. Yeah, 13 years. Maybe that'll be the subtitle of this episode. 13 years later, after the end times.
Yes, I love it. 13 years later.
So ZigZag, you have a new book coming out, and it's a sequel to that wonderful book we talked about last time you were on the show, The Brothers Jetstream Leviathan. Is that true?
That is true. It is a direct sequel, the only sequel I've ever done, and probably will be the only sequel I'll ever do. Not because it wasn't fun, but it was a blast to write it. But I think I've pretty much told the story of what's going on in that particular universe.
Yeah, and how many times can your people save the universe? Can your heroes save the universe? I guess they have to do it a lot, but how many times are you going to want to write that,
Yeah, and I mean, since their tagline is saving the universe one last damn time, every time, at a certain point, you want to let them retire.
Yeah, it's not going to be like that, what is the video game franchise, Final Fantasy, where every game is Final Fantasy, and now they're on Final Fantasy 16 or whatever. Yeah.
And the difference this time out, though, is that the first book was everybody in the crew. This time, it's just the ladies of the crew. I wanted to have fun with them in their own adventure.
Nice. Yeah, and there were it has been a while since I read Brothers Jetstream and Leviathan, but there were a lot of fantastic characters in there, both men and women. And and there were a lot of women, though, who I can remember pretty clearly. There was, the names are starting to escape me because there's a lot of them. Desiree, she was the captain, right? Yeah. Maybe you can remind me of some of them rather than me trying to stumble through it.
Well, the main ones in the sequel is Captain Desiree Kicho, Neon, and Yvonne, her friend, and a new character named Kita Lafleur, who is their engineer, jack of all trades for this time out.
Gosh, your names are so good. You do such a good job with all that stuff. I guess it's the other thing is when you take your time with fiction, it really shows, Take your time and ruminate on it.
In fiction, everything, the title, the name, chapter titles, everything matters.
Right. Yeah, it's one of those things that it can seem so eclectic sometimes, when you take characters from all over a setting, all over a universe, a world, whatever, and you throw them all together. But that's also part of the fun. That's so much fun, in fact. These characters, they're different kind of origin, I guess, and it's apparent in all sorts of stuff, all sorts of facets of them.
Oh yeah, it just adds so much to the flavor of the story, and it's not even that you have to, not even trying to do origin stories for everybody. It's just you create the character and you drop them in a situation and you see what happens. I love doing that.
Right. So do you do that without a plan usually, or do you kind of or do you have more of an idea of where the book's going to go before you do that?
I usually have a feeling of where I want the book to go, but there's never a plan. I'm a supreme pantser. Yes, I start off with just a feeling or sometimes just a title, and I go from there. Now, after once I get something on the page, then I might start to plot a little bit, but it's mostly just Dr. Seuss pants and having fun with words.
Dr. Seuss, yes. That's a favorite of mine, actually, from when I was a kid, of course.
I still love Dr. Seuss.
What's your favorite Dr. Seuss?
McElligot's Pool.
Oh, man.
That's what started me off on Seuss, and also on just wanting to use my imagination for cool, fun things.
Nice. My favorite is always the Butter Battle book because, and now actually, I like it better now that I know it's what it actually means. What it's referring to is the Cold War and how God, the Susada is so ridiculous and scary, obviously, but yeah.
Yes.
So, anyways, enough about that digression. So remind us again what the title of that book is. The new one.
The new one is Afro Puffs Are the Antennae of the Universe.
Yes. And does this... I think I've seen... you post a few things about this occasionally, and am I to take it that this is... They go to space in this one?
This one, yes.
Or is that a spoiler?
Well,
no spoilers.
There's a space element to it, but that's not a huge part of it.
Okay.
At the end of the Brothers Jetstream, it was mentioned that the brothers might have to go into space. And Milo and his, Milo Jetstream hates going into space. So that's kind of a running joke in the sequel, where Milo and a few other people are off in space. And Desiree it starts off with she's doing a raid on a moon base to steal some rather interesting technology. And so that's where her space adventure starts. But it's mostly earthbound.
Oh, that's cool. I mean, I really liked the seafaring elements in the previous book. The fantastic creatures and the... Yeah, all Atlantis stuff.
Definitely get that one in this one, too. I mean, there's not as large a sea creature as Leviathan this time out. But this one, we get Bobo the Mag, which is short for magnificent. And Bobo's a giant red Pacific octopus.
Oh, no. Yes.
Not giant as in Ray Harryhausen movie giant, but just he's a big octopus.
Okay. Oh, like a normal bit giant octopus.
Yeah.
In size, anyway.
Yeah. So I mean, technically, that's the name for him is.
Yeah.
Giant, but if I put that in the book, people are going to automatically think, "Ooh, okay, we got the Kraken again." No.
Yeah, he's not a Kraken.
No.
Well, a Kraken or squid too. It's the other thing. Them, usually, anyway. Yeah, so we got sea creatures again. Oh, that's gonna rock. I'm looking forward to this one. And I've got to say, it as much as the first book had this kind of, I mean, it's this really gonzo element to it, right? Like, okay, we're going very gonzo. I'm like, I actually have been craving that lately. This kind of over the top, adventure. Yeah.
Yes, same here. I mean, one of the reasons I wrote Leviathan was, I missed the kind of crazy over the top stuff we got back in the 80s, like, with Big Trouble in Little China and Buckaroo Banzai, which, this book, owes a lot to Buckaroo Banzai. It was kind of like my homage to Buckaroo Banzai. Just that crazy, smart, giving a wink to the audience, let's go run and have fun kind of material.
Yeah. Yeah, it kind of reminds me of some of the works of Roger Zelazny as well, although that's maybe a bit of a reach. I just that's one of my favorites. It kind of fits in that, like, oh yeah, you can encounter just about anything here. Okay, now he's in Camelot,
Right.
There's that element of this world is so big, this universe is so expansive, and anything can happen, and it really feels that way.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff where they say, anything can happen, but it's anything of a subset of things can happen.
Right. Yeah. It doesn't, a lot of stuff just doesn't give you that room as a reader to run around and play. And, when I'm reading something, I love to run around behind the author and play with what they're doing.
Yeah. Another one that reminds me of is Garth Nix. The series was middle grade, I believe. It was Keys to the Kingdom. And it's like... You haven't heard of that one?
Oh, no, I don't have to check that one out.
It's from a few years ago. So each one is about a day of the week, because it's like this universal fantasy. Anyway, so, and I used to really be into Garth Nix, but I kind of aged out of this series. I really should go back and finish it because it was amazing. The first couple books, so each of the villains is named after a day of the week.
Okay.
And so each book is named after the villain. But they're each the stewards of like reality or something, and that's right in the beginning of the book. So they were left behind as the ones to manage all of time and space or something. And so there's space travel and there's crazy urban fantasy type stuff in it. It's pretty fantastic.
Oh yeah, I love stuff that blends genres. So give me space travel, and on the planet, give me space dinosaurs. I'm good with that.
Yeah, there's a space bear in one of the books. No spoilers. But yeah, they go to space and they have to go into this sun to get this thing. They have to fly a spaceship into a star. Pretty insane stuff. Yeah.
Well, I love I mean, considering both you and I are Dr. Seuss fans, the insane, goofy, crazy, fun stuff is just right up our alley.
Oh, absolutely. There's this. It's one of those things like this. I mean, just like right along with one of my favorite things from Dr. Seuss, from the imagery of Dr. Seuss, is the big long hand on the end of a pole. You know, I mean, like, why? But also, why not?
Right. It seems to be odd, but it makes a lot of sense in a way.
Yeah, I like to do the thing where I explain a lot about it. I know. I mean, in your books, are a little bit I pick something up insane or absurd, and I kind of try to make it realistic. And I'm not saying your books aren't in some way, but yours almost feel like approach it from a more surrealist point of view, at least in these two books. It was the first one that I've read.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, I don't spend a lot of time trying to ground the action. I mean, I have a creature in the first book, and it kind of makes a show in the second book called a Singularity. And they are like these creatures in the sea that are so big they can bite a whale in half. And I don't describe them in detail or try to go be taxonomic with it. I just say they're these big things that can bite a whale in half, and I leave it for the reader to fill in the rest.
Yeah, that's the kind. And I mean, especially with creatures, I like to delve into the creatures a lot. I got that D&D side of me. Like, I want to know how they work and what they're like on the inside. But that's not always necessary. It's just one of those things that it's my personal thing that I really enjoy, and that people tend to get on me about, because often my creatures are kind of scary, like your singularities. I mean, they're like, oh yeah, why is the creature growing hands from all over its body? I don't know. It's a Tim creature. It's a Niederreiter creature. Yeah, I mean, spoiler alert for future series that may exist. For me. Anyway, so you want to shed some light on the kind of conflict this book's about? I mean, is it the same sort of theme as the first book, or did you take it off in a new direction, similar to how you've gotten you've limited your characters to the women, the female characters? So, do you approach the writing differently from that point of view, or are you gonna do it? Are you doing it more or less the same, or do you not really notice a difference? I guess is what I'm trying to say.
It's more or less the same as far as what they do with the adventure. There is a definite difference in the tones of the book. The first book was definitely, testosterone filled, even though it wasn't, dude heaven book. But this book is more, it's a little more tight. It's a little slower. And it's definitely comes from a feminist perspective, which is something that, it was pointed out to me that almost all my books have that. And I never stopped to, analyze it. It just was the way I wrote. But I grew up with, aunts, my mother, grandmother, all of it. So there was never any reason for me not to include women in my stories. And not only include them, but make them the forefront of the stories. It was a natural thing. So that's what I did with this book, because I could be cynical and say, well, I did this because I wanted to jump on the bandwagon. But this has been 5 years in the making. So this is before a lot of stuff that's going on now. And the sequel was always planned out to be about the women of the crew. From the moment that I wrote the end on the Brothers Jetstream, that title was already there.
Yeah.
And the story was there.
Wow. Yeah, I guess that's not a wow. That's just, when I think of 5 years, that's a good chunk of time to be working on a book for me. But it's also, it adds a lot of weight to the power, the kind of, the investment there is very powerful. And it just kind of struck me.
Oh yeah, and I don't want it to seem like I was working on it 5 years straight, because life happens, and as with any writer, you start, you stop, you start, you stop. And this one almost didn't see fruition, but a friend of mine basically kicked my butt and said, "Get this book done."
Well, I need to find that friend and thank him.
Oh, yes. I thank her with all my heart.
Yeah. No, that's beautiful. I mean, like, certain books of mine wouldn't have come out if certain someone hadn't kicked my butt on this podcast on its first appearance a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
That was you, by the way.
Yeah, I remember.
Just for listeners who may not understand my obliqueness, but it's kind of funny, and that goes back to the Seuss thing of, this is just a crazy world, and you hear this crazy stuff. It's all out, and that particular story was so out there for me, and also I thought it just was no good. I thought, how could it be good, right? But it was. I mean, people are liking it.
We are always and always will be our worst critics.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one thing that, this 2020 has taught me, that if you're going to criticize yourself, give yourself some leeway to at least enjoy what you're doing to earn that criticism. It's like, if I'm going to tell myself this book is no good, well, I'm going to write a book about, a rogue AI and an octopus and, just make it work. And once I'm done, if my little nattering brain in the back of my head wants to say it's crap, it can say that, but at least I can say I did it. I finished it.
Yeah, up yours voice in the back of my head.
Right, and that voice is always wrong because it's never crap. I mean, we've all been writing long enough. You know when something is crap, and you know when it's not. And I love Afro Puffs. This book I want to say it's my favorite that I've written so far.
Hey, fair enough. I mean, I that's usually how I feel about my newest book. But it's also, I mean, you got a bit more experience than me in life, so I'd imagine you have a better assessment of that kind of thing, honestly.
Yeah, this one is, I mean, there are things that I did in Leviathan that I don't do in this one.
Mm-hmm.
But this one, there's a bit more soul to it, if that's the right word I want to use here. There's when you get to the end of this one, there's just little extra fairy dust sprinkled out.
No, I think I know what you're trying to say. Yeah, I think I get the drift. Because it's that feeling of this is kind of special. This is this magic is there that brings the whole thing to life even more than other stories of the similar, even the same universe.
Definitely.
It's like this is the one you wanted to do in the first place, almost. I mean, maybe. I don't know. Maybe I'm jumping to that conclusion.
In a way, this is the only sequel I could have done to the Jet films.
Yeah.
I went into it intentionally calling it the anti-sequel sequel because I did not want to, like with Star Wars. You got Star Wars, then your next sequel you have to do Empire Strikes Back, and the stakes have got to get bigger and bigger. And I made this a lot. The stakes are actually pretty personal in this book. It's not a huge explosion kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to go, and I knew that after Leviathan, which that was everything plus the kitchen sink thrown at those characters. I wanted something where the stakes are still high, but it never feels like this is a big bombastic adventure. It's more you're following these characters, these women along, who basically they just want to relax for a little while, and everything under the sun keeps interrupting that. So it's kind of like this book is about what would someone who is just super pissed off do in order to change the world so they can get a little bit of peace.
That's the story of our times, honestly. That's such an approach that's an artistic approach to our times if you think about it,
Oh yeah, and this book is definitely in response to our times now. I mean, I wrote this clearly in mind, giving two solid middle fingers up to all the men's rights groups out there and all the idiocy of the world. That it's just why are you persistently being an annoyance to people who are just trying to live their lives?
Yeah, I mean, it's a question I wish more people would ask themselves. Lord, I ask myself that enough,
And there's one thing to be, unintentionally, but there are people who wake up in the morning knowing I'm going to be an ass today.
Yeah.
So this book was written with them well in mind and basically telling them, have a seat, we're done with you.
Sit down and maybe, shut up, I guess. Sit down and shut up.
Sit down, shut up, learn something.
Yeah, listen for a change, guys. Yeah. And,
Yeah.
other folks as well. Everyone who's on that side could do, I mean, we can all do with listening. That's the thing. But some people have been talking way too much. I agree with that, yeah.
I mean, the whole thing about the Mary Sue, which makes me so mad whenever I hear anybody mention, well, that character's a Mary Sue. I want to throttle people. Because, why is Tony Stark not a Mary Sue? Why is Bruce Banner? Why is Peter Parker not a Mary Sue? That's always accepted as, it just is, he went through this thing and he's
James Bond too.
And all of those, you never ever hear any of those guys mention, well, that's just unrealistic for a guy to do that. Let anybody bring a woman to do that, and suddenly it's, that's just not believable. Like, screw that noise. No, this book is if your mindset is a woman cannot do these things, this book is definitely not for you.
Right. And that actually reminds me of another favorite of mine, Cameron Hurley, another author I've had on this show.
Yes.
I really love her books too. And that's maybe not quite in the same terms, but she's definitely bowling in the same alley, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
I love her work.
You get some authors who, when they do their work, they're not timid with it. They are coming straight out and bowling you over. And that's kind of what I wanted to do with this book, with Afro Puffs. I'm like, from page one, my politics, my sensibilities, everything is clearly there. And I make no apologies for it.
And that's really beautiful. I mean, the honesty, isn't that what people really want these days? I mean, and even if they don't want it, even if people don't want to hear your honesty, it's still it's gonna stick. It's gonna make an impact if you're honest enough. And if you show people who you really are, they can reject you, but they gotta acknowledge you at that point, basically.
Yes, I agree. And that's something that's in short supply now. I mean, I would hope that, as we come out of 2020, that more artists and just more people, period, edge into that honest zone. And not honesty where, that like with our current person sitting in the Oval Office, where people say, well, I like him because he speaks his mind. You can be as dumb as dirt and speak your mind. So that's not necessarily speaking honestly. That's speaking and living honestly comes from connecting to something outside yourself and beyond yourself. That's what the
honesty, a kind of truth greater than yourself. Yeah,
always that. Because that's what art is supposed to do anyway. It's all about. It's not just here I made a thing, look at it. It's supposed to show you connections to things that you might not have seen yourself. And if you're only just presenting, well, this is just, this is how I would like it to be in order for someone else to be quiet, that's not being honest. I don't want people to be quiet about this book. I have no problem with, it being criticized up, down, left, and right. But there's no way you can read this and not speak honestly about it.
So you want to provoke a kind of honest response, and that makes so much sense. That's a beautiful sentiment and goal.
I think so. I think that's what, I didn't set out to provoke, but it's what it does.
Maybe provoke's the wrong word, but
that's a perfect word for it, because I think the best art provokes us in some way, and then and that doesn't have to be used belligerently.
Exactly, that's kind of what I was saying. It has that implication, but
it should, Octavia Butler had the saying in her books, The Parable of the Sower, that everything you touch, you change. And that's how art should be, that it should provoke that type of change in you.
Wow, I am so behind on Octavia Butler's works. I need to go back. I need to get more of them, because I have Some of them. I've read a few, but I'm not nearly as educated in that field as I should be. So, just like I'm such a slow reader nowadays, but whatever.
Well, if nothing else, grab Kindred and then grab the Parable series.
Okay.
Be prepared to be blown away.
Yeah, I have Kindred, and I've started reading the first of that. Yeah. I have like a collection. I think it's the Kindred ones. Maybe this is a different series. Actually, geez. I wish I could see it from where I'm sitting, but I can't. Yeah. But that does remind me. I want to do some reading recommendations. Do you want to do some reading recommendations?
Always.
You can go first if you don't mind. I mean, what have you been reading lately that you'd recommend to people? Yeah.
All right. So Carlos Hernandez has 2 books out. They're middle grade, but I read them for my own pleasure. It's Sal and Gabby Break the Universe, and then Sal and Gabby Fix the Universe. They are so much fun. I mean, Carlos is such an inventive writer, and he captures the voice of these young high school kids. I mean, he's just entering high school, or is it middle school? I think it's middle school.
Middle school. That sounds more like for middle grade. Yeah.
And the voice in that is so. We're speaking of honesty. The voice is so honest and authentic. You don't read this thinking, oh, this is some grown-up who's writing, trying to sound like a kid. This is a book about a kid who is aware of his world and is able to speak on that. And I love it. Cool. And another one that I've just picked up, which came out a few years ago, Amal El-Matar's The Honey Month is outstanding. It's the idea behind it, as I understand it, is she got a gift of honeys, and she decided to write a book based on each honey. So the book is her telling us, okay, this is this day's honey. Mm-hmm. This is its scent, its taste. She describes it, and then sometimes it's a poem, sometimes a short piece of fiction, but it is just so beautiful. It's a book made to be savored. It's slim, but I've been reading a page every other day just so I can make it last throughout the year. I cannot recommend it enough. The Honey Month.
Yeah, no, it's wonderful. That reminds me of actually another book you wrote, actually, I believe, under your other name. It sounds kind of similar in a way to, is it In the Quiet Places?
In the Quiet Spaces.
Spaces, yeah.
It has a similar feel to that, but this is so much more expansive. I mean, it includes poetry, fantasy stories. It's just,
wow, yeah, it sounds amazing.
It's just a beautiful piece of work. I love it. I mean, I love her writing, period, but this book is just, it's a treasure. And I don't say that about very many books.
Oh, yeah. No, it's yeah, I mean, how yeah. Anyway, I'm stumbling over the words here, but you that sounds fantastic. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and you're really selling it. That's the other thing. It sounds as good. I bet it's as good as you make it sound for sure. Maybe better.
I mean, it's one of those books where, and I did this during the summer, where you want to take it outside and read it aloud, just to yourself. But it's better to read it to someone. But if it's just you and the trees, read it out loud.
So and much it'll do. The trees can appreciate that. Yeah. So yeah, those are some great recommendations. I actually have one as well. It's actually kind of a podcast recommendation because I'm not sure if I'd recommend this book on its own, because the book is Infinite Jest, which everyone probably has heard of, at least on some level. But the actual recommendation I'm going to make is for Infinite Cast, which is a podcast where this husband-wife duo reads Infinite Jest. And a professional audio producer. Is the husband's a professional audio producer, and his wife is reading him Infinite Jest, and then they talk about it.
Oh, I love that.
It's like, it's really, and it's like, the book's not always great, and it's a huge book, so they just started. They're like 9 or 10 episodes in as of this release, And they don't read a lot at a time. It's like half an hour to an episode, but they get through 5 or 6 pages a lot of these. And it's a really interesting show. So, and the book gives a lot to talk about. That's the most important thing. The reason the book is a great source material for it is it's just so weird, frankly. And it's literary. It's literary fiction. It's a big, fat novel that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me so far, but I'm only 60 pages in because I'm reading it with this group, this podcast. Anyway, so yeah, definitely I'd put that up as a recommendation, and I can say I may have recommended it before, actually. I think I may have recommended it last week, but I recommend it again. It's gotten even better since then. So, Geez, my brain must be fried. I can't remember what I recommended last week, but definitely check that out. Yeah,
it kind of sounds like. Do they go for a humorous edge at all? Because it sounds like Mystery Science Theater 3000 only with a literary bent, which I love that conceit.
Well, there's usually less like jokes about it. It's more just kind of trying to appreciate this literature for what it is, and it's not always positive, but it's not always poking fun either. So it's a very interesting approach. Yeah. And I gotta say, surprisingly, the episode where they just basically read an end note for an hour and a half was one of the best. It was an end note that's just a list of fictional movies that this other character created in the setting of the story. Very weird. It's a filmography, and it's just all there. I'm like, well, that's insane. Why would anyone write that? Why would anyone put that in a novel, at least? Right. But it's there, and they read it, and they talk about it, and it's fantastic, weirdly. Yeah, I'm not sure if I'd have as much fun reading that book on my own, though. That's why this is a recommendation for the podcast, not the book. But whatever. I've gone off on that tangent long enough. So ZigZag, thanks for being on the show, and tell people where they can find your work, and when is Afro Puffs Are the Antennae of the Universe going to be out?
December 1st, Tuesday, December 1st is the official release date. It'll probably be up for pre-sale soon. And you can go to obsidianskybooks.com to keep up on information about it. And I'm probably going to do a book launch party too sometime in early December. Just because, why not? We need to have more fun. We need to have some funky music to ring the year out.
Yeah, like hell we do. I mean, we definitely need that. And I can't think of a better MC or so for that kind of thing than you, sir.
Oh, trust me. If I'm doing it, there's going to be some Parliament playing. So
wonderful. So thanks everybody for listening. For more of this podcast, you can go to mentalcellarpublications.com, or you can find us hosted on Libsyn. We're also available through all podcatchers. You can find all my books on Amazon.com, and now you can start finding print versions all over the web, because I might be exclusive in ebook form, but you can always get those juicy print books out wherever fine print books are distributed online. And who knows, maybe someday I'll be able to get them in your local Barnes & Noble, at least if you're in Minnesota. I don't see myself being able to track one down elsewhere, but that's a lot of work. But thanks for listening, everybody. Oh, yeah. Definitely have a good one, and stay safe, everybody. Take it easy, and talk to you next week.
That tears it.